All right, here we go. All right, welcome to Artcasters, episode 441, and it's a big reunion tonight where we have Scott and David back together again. They've missed each other multiple times.
Yeah,
we seem to keep reanimating dead guests whenever David's on, but we thought we'd bring everybody back together. Before Dave's introduction, let's introduce ourselves. You can catch my stuff at corykerr.com/rage if you want to see the new comic, and that is available there like this. And you can sign up for the email newsletter if you want to make sure that you don't miss out on anything. And if you check, you can see what I'll be working on tonight, which is the dung finding machine. That's part of the comic that's going to come up in the next few pages. And so if you don't want to miss that, get on the newsletter. And Scott, where can we find your stuff?
You can find my stuff at circworks.com, and the stuff you will find are like my wax packs. I've currently been making wax pack trading cards in the style of the old ones you used to get back in the day, of movies that they never made wax packs of, movies, bands, TV shows. So check those out. I also, on that same channel, I have my comic book Young and the Dead. It's a kids versus zombie adventure story. Just think Goonies meets Night of the Living Dead. And then there's prints and other stuff on there as well. I also have a YouTube channel where you can find a few different things. You can find me creating things like wax packs and other cool stuff, ephemera from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, kind of Gen X era. And then I put my own unique spin on it. Those are fun. And if you go back a little further, you'll find my series, Making Comics 101. It is the most comprehensive free course on comics you can find anywhere, and it's free on YouTube. So, I mean, a lot of times, there's a lot of information out there on YouTube, but typically you have to pay for the stuff that's curated like this, that you can just kind of watch and get everything you need in the order you need it. This is free. It's on YouTube, so check it out.
Cool. And Josh, where can we find your stuff?
Awesome. Yeah. If you like indie comics, you should pick up Jacob's Apartment, a doomed romance story about two lost lovers that find each other and basically end up having dreams and reality interweave. So it's kind of like if you took Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind, put it in a blender with Ghost World, and you like that flavor, there's Jacob's Apartment. And then there's also my book, Two Stories, which tries to destigmatize hard conversations about mental illness, like depression and anxiety and all that kind of stuff. So, so make sure you check those books out, and also check out the albums that I've recently released under Joshua Kemble. There's like 4 albums I put out this year. So, yeah.
Cool. And we've got Keeman and Dylan and Jim in the chat. So thanks for joining us, everybody. And David, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll jump into our topic.
Sure. Yeah. You can find my art at David Hartman Art on Instagram, or my website, sideshowmonkey.com. I primarily work in animation as a director, producer, and I'm also doing comic books, movies, a little bit of everything that has to do with entertainment and storytelling. I just like to make stuff. So a little bit of everything.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so you didn't get a lot of time because Stan Lee, the consummate promoter, was in full force last time.
That was actually probably my favorite.
It was great. It was hilarious. But then after we went off the air, I was like, I want to have this conversation. So you've been doing animation, you've been doing comics, probably more animation than comics.
Oh yeah,
recently, yeah.
And
then but you still had like several books. You're like, yeah, this one's coming out.
I did
this is coming out.
The series called Strange Cases for Image in the early 2000s. That was with Steve Niles and Dan Wickline writing. I did the art for that was for Image. Then I did The Devil's Rejects with Rob Zombie, which was just a one-off, but it was for Comic-Con and did really well. And then I do a lot of like anthology books. Like I'll just be a guest artist and do like an 8-pager or anything. I haven't, because animation is such a full-time job, you can't really commit to a monthly book. And and animation pays a little better than the comics, or at least the ones I was working on. So, those are the hard choices you have to make. But comics is actually like one of my true loves, since I was a little kid. That was my first kind of medium that I felt like could just be mine, where I go, hide in bed and have my horror comics or whatever, and no one's bothering you. It's not like a movie where you're in the theater with a bunch of people. It's just kind of like you in the story. Comics kind of took over. So now, I've been working in animation for a long time. I'm starting to get back into some comic books, and got a few lined up for the next couple of years, which is great.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you kind of mentioned just animation is kind of struggling. So there was a bit of
right now it's at a real low, one of the biggest lows in my professional career. I've never really seen it this low. Now, there could be a million reasons why, but it's we have streaming, we had a pandemic, there's all these different things kind of compound. And after a while, it's just, the bubble burst. But, I still believe in creativity and artistry.
Yeah.
And I don't think animation's going anywhere. It's just needs to bounce back a little bit. But I'm in LA, and, it's kind of Burbank is like the heart of animation, where there's like all these studios. So, I know a lot of people are struggling right now, which is really tough. So I'm hoping it bounces back soon.
Yeah. Well,
but I'm going to work on comics, and I have many other friends who are working on comics right now. Taking the kind of lull almost as a license to, well, no one's hiring right now, so I might as well make the best of it and tell these stories I've kept in my head for a long time that I keep saying someday I'll put these out. Well, maybe now's the time if you're not working and you're not looking for a career change. This is what I'm doing. I'm taking advantage of this what downtime we have and use it to focus on comics and other mediums.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I just got back into comics as well, and I'm probably doing it the least financially safe or savvy way possible, which is I'm just doing it as a web comic. So I'm just giving the pages away for free, kind of as I do them, and then down the road when I finish a volume or whatever, I might Kickstarter it or whatever. But what are your plans? Are you gonna publish some of these through a publisher? Are you gonna self-publish?
I have 2 books slated, one for next year, one the following year, through Titan Books, and these are ones I did through Monster Forge Comics, which is buddy Shannon Eric Denton, and he wrote these books and I drew them, right? Then I have another one that I'm doing with him, I just remembered, and then I have another one that's mine that's about 100 pages that I have it finished. It's completely done, it's lettered, it's colored, it's just sitting on my iPad. I've shown you guys some of it, I think, a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just been kind of sitting there where I'm not sure what to do with it yet, Josh.
Sorry about that.
Why did I recognize that theme song? What was?
That was my Game of Thrones ringtone.
It's like I've heard that somewhere.
I just got your channel demonetized, Cory.
Yeah, thanks. Copyright strike.
But yeah, it's like I forget what I was saying now. But with this comic, I'm thinking about trying crowdfunding. I keep saying that. I don't know. That's a lot of work in itself. Kind of a full-time job of becoming a marketer. Running a campaign, that's a lot. But I also, I sent it to a couple publishers. We'll see. I don't know. Or I might just print it myself and just do it, which is, sounds like the harder way, but it's probably the way of least resistance for me. Just come and just sell them through the website. But I don't know. Just waiting and seeing.
That's cool.
yeah, that's gonna be another day's problem, and I'm just gonna start on the next book and just keep drawing while while I'm inspired, I guess. And then once I am inspiration is run out and I'm burned out, that's when you switch gears and it's like, okay, I'm not gonna draw for a few weeks, and I'm just gonna focus on what I'm gonna do with all this material that's just collecting dust now.
I really like that as a method. Like I've had a couple of career transitions, in the past, and each time the one thing I'm consistent with is like I'm always working on some kind of creative project. And what I find is like a lot of the time, if you use those like windows of downtimes or like where industry's in flux or something's in change, but you're still being consistent with output, it's interesting because you do end up in scenarios where, maybe you're hitting a brick wall for a year, and then the next thing you know, like you have publisher interest, and now you have multiple books to give, to give out, where you can be like, oh, not only do I have that, I also have this, I have this. And so you can kind of create this illusion of being this like, prolific artist when you are like David, you're a very prolific artist, but at the same time, a lot of the work that's going to be coming out in a year is work you finished years ago.
Right.
And it's like,
exactly. Yeah.
And so if you keep that pipeline kind of going, I think that's, I think for creatives, it's almost essential.
Yeah. Stay ahead of it that way. And I also got things I put on the shelf that like years later, then the opportunity arises.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not trying to make an opportunity that's not there. It's like, I have the material, here it is. Let's try and make something.
Yeah. I love that.
Speaking of, I'm going to share my screen too, because I want to draw while we.
Yeah.
You're going to draw a whole comic book page?
No, I'm just going to doodle monsters.
Yeah, the last time David was on, for anybody watching who didn't see that, David did an entire comic page in like an hour.
I don't know if that was the last time he was on, but one time he was on.
Yeah, one time.
Not the last time. The last time he was on with Scott, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
Been the last time.
The last time he was on the Artcasters,
he got
a whole 17 and a half words out.
Upset, literally.
That was such a compelling. It was amazing how much Stan Lee felt like I had imagined talking to Stan Lee would be.
Yeah,
it really was
extremely accurate. Yeah, that's cool. Josh, I'm kind of curious. You've played with animation and been doing comics for a long time. What's your kind of balance between the two? I know you did. I mean, you animated a ton of music videos for that one album a year or two ago.
Yeah,
and you're like, oh yeah, but it was like you got them done really quick. You're putting them out like weekly.
Yeah,
it was fast. And then just didn't really go back to it. What talk to me about this whole comics versus animation thing? I'm trying to get some incitement going.
For me, animation's fascinating and cool, and I think that the few times I've done it, I definitely see the addiction of animation, because there's that moment. In whatever medium of animation you're using, where something still that didn't exist starts moving. And I can see why artists get addicted to that, because there's something very beautiful about that. Like you get to make something move, that's like a drawing. And that's just a whole different game than comics. And there's similarities in different processes of animation, like if you're doing story art, that's almost like half finished comics, and a lot of people who do animation, like Scott said, are like some of the best artists in the world are, doing animation. And so they could easily do comics and stuff like that. But, yeah, I'm kind of with David in the sense that comics is like my love language. It's like, comics are something I'm just going to do regardless, probably until I'm dead. Because it's the first medium that connected to me, where all the potential of it has always been really exciting to me. and the untapped potential too. There's still a lot to discover with comics. And for me, I also feel like comics are frustrating too in a really cool way, like where I think there's a million things I want to try in comics. And the second I try something new, there's another technique or another thing that I haven't tried yet. Or, you know, like I'll get a really good handle on line weights and, you know, like balance of black and white or like panel flow. But then like, there's other there's just so many design elements in it that it just intrigues me and I love it. But I think very similar to David, yeah, it's like it kind of stems back to like when I was a kid and I first, you know, got like heavy into comics, you know, and being able to like sit down. The intimate experience of comics, I feel like it's like a diary. It's almost like reading a diary. And well, as opposed to like a film where it's kind of a communal experience or it's something you can experience with multiple people at the same time. And you have less say in how it plays out. Whereas with a comic, you know, it's almost like, you know, it would be weird if you were watching a movie and then you just kept pausing to like absorb a frame of the film. Like you kind of lose the experience. Whereas with a comic, it wasn't unusual as a kid or like even as an adult to get to like a spread where I just want to stay and look at the art for a while, you know, and then continue the story. And it feels natural. So it's interesting, but I will say animation's amazing. And I don't think it's an accident that like Winsor McKay, right, the guy who did like Little Nemo and Slumberland and stuff, also kind of invented a lot of the early methods of animation because it's like they're two brothers or they're two siblings from the same parent. You know what I mean? Like they're very similar dynamics. I think a lot of the same principles of movement and gesture and drawing like definitely apply. But yeah, like I don't know what it is that I think maybe I'm scared of animation because I have experienced that moment where you see things move and it's very addictive and it's like I'm already spending so much time doing comics. I don't know if I don't know how much bandwidth I have.
Yeah, it is very time consuming. And, you know, like what I do, you know, mainly for my career has been storyboards, you know, and when I first got into animation, it was Sony TV back on this show called Extreme Ghostbusters. And, I was just a revision artist, and it's like a lot of the storyboard artists came from comics. A lot of them were comics guys, and when I got in was kind of, you know, when that Image kind of bubble popped, like they had all these artists and a lot of stuff, but then it just kind of, you know, became too much, and all the foil covers weren't worth as much as they used to be, and stuff. So a lot of
the cartoonists had to sell their Benzes and their limo drives. They had to stop taking limos to signings.
Right.
It makes perfect sense. That's probably where you got your speed from, David, is from doing storyboards.
Oh yeah, absolutely it is. Because you're forced to draw things you wouldn't normally draw. It's outside you got to draw things that are outside of your comfort zone, and you know, even though storyboards aren't as posed out, I would say, like as animation itself is, you still have to draw poses that are very awkward. They're those in between poses. You know, you got Spider-Man with his leg up swinging. You got Spider-Man about to leap off the building, but you also got to draw that really awkward pose that's somewhere in between, right? And just as a drawing on its own, it looks so wrong. But then when you see it move, you're like, okay, that works. You know, and you got to go with your instincts of how the body works, how the anatomy would react to those things, and even if it feels weird, you know, you still got to go with it. And I don't know. I found that really daunting at the beginning. And then now I totally appreciate that I did that, you know, because I'm a creature of, you know, I get the things that I like to draw and I'll kind of stick with that for a while. And then, you know, not that you hit ruts, but, you know, we all kind of hit those things where you're like, okay, you get inspired and you actually go out and purposely draw something you wouldn't normally do, right?
Yeah.
And then you feel so much better once you've pulled it off or accomplished it. And, it's kind of like that, but all the time. And with storyboards also, you're forced to draw other people's characters and drawing characters that you wouldn't, in styles you wouldn't normally want to draw, or, so it forces you have no choice but to reach a point where you trust your line work. And even if your line work is wrong, you go with it. You make the lines around it as right as you can, so that wrong one. Otherwise, you get caught up in the schedules and the time constraints, and it's like, you'll have one beautiful drawing, but you got to do 1,000 more. So moving.
So I've got a question about storyboards. How often? Because I've seen like Ryan Woodard and others, their storyboards are a lot closer to animatics. How often are storyboards kind of more like a radio play, and how often are you like, I'm gonna go in here and I'm actually gonna take this storyboard into After Effects and kind of do some real moving previs?
I do it a lot because I'd like to tell stories and all that. I do full on sound effects, temp music, a lot of stuff. But most of it's done within this industry with that software called Toon Boom Storyboard Pro, which it's vector based, but you can also do bitmap, and you can do 3D camera moves with it and using planes and stuff like that. And it's really good for that. So I'm actually in the middle of directing and boarding a project now where I'm doing that very thing. I'm posing it out. I'm doing music, sound effects, all that. But in my day and age, I don't want to be the get off my lawn. I don't like the world changing around me guy. But back in my day, when I first was starting, it's like, you don't do that. We would have, if we did any kind of timing with our drawings, we had a thing called the Frame Master, and it was this calculator that counted in 24 frames. And you would have to start it and stop it. So I'd kind of like, oh, this guy's going to reach for his cup of coffee, and you just kind of click. It's like, oh, okay, 8 frames, and you'd write 8 frames down. And then we actually had timing directors. So there was actually guys whose whole job is timing it, taking that timing, adding it up, then converting it to feet, how much footage there is, because the animation studios, charge by the foot. And we didn't do the kind of editing and sound effects and all that stuff. And even then, as editing became, with the Avid and stuff, became more readily available and introduced into that world, you still had editors put the animatics together. You would sit with them, you would talk about timing, they would put in the music, sound effects. For me, it's like, I really feel like it's only in the last, maybe, I wouldn't even say 10 years, maybe 5 years or less, that it's almost becomes, that's part of the storyboard artist's job. And that's fine, because the world changes and you're going to put more on people. The thing is as technology gets more easy to use, like, I'm kind of for it in that I like to have control of the story. I do want to control the sound effects, the music, the tone, the pacing, and all that.
Yeah.
But that also takes jobs away from other people who those were their distinct jobs. And so, and as new generations come in, and then it's like, oh, that's what's expected of me. They learn how to do all that stuff.
Yeah.
And even with YouTube and stuff, and the animators, they're also editors and also sound effects artists and doing their own thing, taking it to that next level. So I think it's just a natural progression, but at the same time, it's kind of unnerving to watch how things have changed. Where I felt like we already had a lot of work.
Yeah.
Work thrown on our plates and expected from us. And just like anything else, there's different talent levels of all those different aspects. So it just makes it even more challenging, I think, for people. So, but
that's interesting.
To answer your question too, Cory, like I still do stuff in After Effects because there's certain shots I just know After Effects better, and there's certain shots I want to do. I know I can only do in that. But since it's just an animatic, sometimes what an animatic truly is a blueprint, right?
Yeah.
And part of me gets again into my get off my lawn, where it's like, well, then what the hell are you paying the animators for? If I'm animating it, because I'm sure as heck not getting the same amount of money they're getting.
Right.
So there's a certain push and pull with that,
It's interesting. I didn't know about there's a couple things because I'm less familiar with obviously like the animation industry. So I didn't even know about the fact that there were like timing directors. That's interesting. Just like where their sole job.
Use them, but when I was working on, like, for example, like a CGI show. So like, for example, I did like Starship Troopers, the TV show, like it was like the late 90s, early 2000s, not to date myself, but that was like when I was first starting to direct and stuff. And we had timing directors, but it almost didn't work anymore because we were doing CG animation with animation artists who aren't like 2D. You trick the eye sometimes saying, hey, that's only two frames to reach for this hand because you're putting speed lines on it.
Yeah.
That CG character, which looks a little more human, it looks sped up, right? So it became more of relying on the animator more. So a lot of those jobs kind of petered out, with technology.
That's so fascinating because I guess I didn't make the connection because I've seen that, when I used to art direct and stuff, the shift that I saw in the industry was people went from really exclusive roles, in commercial art of like, you'd have illustrators, you'd have designers, you might even have like typographers,
Right.
And in the design industry, it's like each person had their own niche. Video editing was its own thing. Like all of these things were their own thing. And in the 10 years that I was art directing, it really went from being like you could be a, artist with graphic design skills and that was enough. And like
Right.
At that point, it was already merged where you can't be an in-house like designer or commercial artist without knowing design as well as a little bit of illustration at least.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of the time I was out of there, it's like you have to be a video editor, a photographer, a product photographer, like a lighting artist, like, and it's all kind of expected that, one or like a very small crew of people can do all of it.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, David. It's kind of like exciting in the sense of having like kind of full control over the process, but I feel like maybe one of the things that gets lost in the wake of that is like kind of the beauty of the expertise of, people who specialize specifically.
And the schedules didn't change either. Like the schedules stayed the same. They didn't expand for that additional work. It was just like, hey, we got 2 less people we have to hire now and still get the same amount of work done in the same amount of time. That's the maddening part. But I'm really talking, it's still pre-production. It's still storyboards. Like once you get into the actual animation part, you still have to have editors and sound guys and all that. But really, storyboard artist more this day than in the past is truly I feel like a director as well. The storyboard artist is picking a lot of the shots. They might have a director giving them direction on how to do that, but you're the cinematographer, you're the choreographer, you're all these different things. And even as myself as a director, I got to give my board guys props, that they do so many cool things that I wish I could have known to do, and just watching them, grow with the technology and all that stuff too is actually kind of exciting, I think.
Yeah, that is really exciting. And another thing, just to clarify to anybody who might be listening, obviously, like, storyboards are very different in live action films versus animation. Animation, storyboard, like, if you're an artist who really wants to be a big part of telling the story, being a storyboard artist in animation is like being in the story department in animation is kind of where it's at with that. Whereas I think with film, a lot of the time you're kind of boarding. It depends on the director, but at least the ones that I've done, it's like generally, most of the stuff I've done is like commercials and stuff, but generally you're kind of helping them visualize so they can pitch to the budget. Like, this is a scene we want to film, give us money to film it. So it's like, it's not so much you're having a huge say in the final product. There might be like one or two ideas you threw in there that's screen.
I think it just depends on the project and the director. Like, I worked with Zack Snyder on Rebel Moon, and doing boards for that. And, some board guys I saw were just doing what you were saying. Like, their task was to do a couple of those shots. In my instance, some of them were like, I got to do an action scene. So I'm actually trying to show how you would kind of choreograph it, but then it goes to a real choreographing stunt team who get inspired by your boards, going, that's cool, but let's take that to the next level. Let's take that idea and improve upon it. And that's what's really cool, is the whole collaborative process to get to that end story. It isn't totally up to just one person,
Yeah, because like you could work for like George Miller, right? And like Fury Road and Furiosa. I mean, if anybody hasn't read the oral history of Fury Road, Blood and Chrome, I
have not, but I love
George
Miller. So
so it's just like it starts. It's just the author went through and just interviewed everyone. He interviewed the actors, he interviewed the stunt guys, he interviewed the storyboard artists, he interviewed the character designers, the costume designer, and like that movie took like 20 years to make. Like they completely set it up in like Tanzania or something, and then there was like an event that like hadn't happened in like hundreds of years with like weather that made them like have to package it all up. They built all the cars, they built it, and they had to package it all up, and then some war broke out, and so they had to like salvage whatever they could and put it on a boat and just like.
That's going to happen to David's film when he tries to film out here where I live in the AV. It's going to be like Doomsday Apocalypse when he comes, and then he'll have to reschedule it for 20 years later.
But long story short, like he relies, even though it's live action, he relies heavily on his storyboard artists to the point where he didn't have a script and hired a bunch of people who were like comic book illustrators. And he was just like, he just locked him in a room. And I guess you can say this now, it's in the book, but like at the time he kept it a secret. He was doing Babe, Pig in the City and Happy Feet. Wow. And in both of those movies, he had a separate room upstairs that he was paying illustrators to do the boards for Fury Road off of those two movies.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And so he was just like, go upstairs and just spend a couple weeks. And I need to figure out how we get from here and here in the story visually. So the goal of everyone the goal that everybody had working on either of those movies was to get sent upstairs.
That's amazing.
Anyway, but yeah, apparently before there was a script, he had thousands and thousands of scenes boarded. And then they kind of pieced them all together and made this thing.
That's wild. Like think about who was the guy who did was it Saul Bass who did the boards for like Psycho?
I know he did the poster art. Did he do boards?
I mean, I think Hitchcock did most of them.
Okay, but I know like Hitchcock was so specific with his boards where it was just like shot for shot, like everything was like meticulous. It's interesting, like thinking about the different kind of directorial styles. David, when you have people board for you, like how specific do you tend to be with the boards, or is it like flexible based on
It depends on
movie.
the scene. There's certain things where I do little like stick figure kind of thumbnails, right? Like this is the idea of the shot. I don't need to make it all pretty. That can do that, but it's something very specific. Then there might be something else like a talking scene, right? Which is there's really a handful of ways you can kind of do those scenes, and it's kind of like that's the easy. Just let the board artists do it, But at the same time, you want to give them stuff to have fun too. So I read the person's like excitement for a scene,
Nice.
And if they're like, oh yeah, I got some ideas, it's like, yeah, go for it. If
Nice.
they're like, I'm gonna struggle with this one, it's kind of tough, then I'll step in, and help out. But that's just everyone's got different tastes and different styles, so that's just part of the process.
Yeah. Okay, so now I'm thinking of a commonality between because we're doing comics versus animation, right? One commonality that I've noticed is like, when a writer, if you're working with a writer, when they describe something that could take like maybe a sentence, with action in particular, that's kind of like a big sequential challenge to make like complicated action scenes happen and be
absolutely
and make sense. Because as you're drawing them, you start working out, wait a minute, now if this guy's on the left, like that doesn't work. Like he needs to actually be positioned over here to make that action work. Where like, I think there's a lot of that kind of thinking that you have to kind of pre-do before somebody has a bunch of actors out there doing it, or
absolutely,
or you're spending a ton of money to have 3D models.
We've had like a lot of storyboard artists, it's kind of notorious that sometimes them and the writers are just like almost mortal enemies, because sometimes the writers will write something that's almost like a throwaway, like a character trips, creates a universe, and civil war ensues, and it's like one sentence, and it's like, okay, that's going to take me a month to draw, right? And you have that aspect, but at the same time, when you hand out a script, so let's say you got like a 27 or 30 page script, or just make it 30 for a half-hour show, and you got 3 board artists, and they're each going to take 10 pages of script, and you have a certain amount of time to do that, some weeks to do it. That one guy that gets that one sentence, it's not equally balanced, right? So you gotta keep that in mind when handing out shows and divvying up who does what scenes.
Like whoever's doing the scene at the Coliseum might need a little more time than the person doing the talking scene in the kitchen.
Yeah, and that stuff just comes really, some of it's common sense, other of it's just experience.
Oh yeah,
it just happens, and you realize what's going to be a lot of work and what's not. But comics. What I like about comics, that it's funny, but I still catch myself doing it. It's like a lot of the guys I knew in comics, they don't have to follow certain movie or TV rules, like the 180-degree rule, right?
Yeah.
Like, if a character's looking left and another guy's looking right and they start shooting guns at each other, you want to keep the guy on the left and shooting and the guy on the right shooting, so who's shooting and where they're shooting. But in a comic, I have to break that myself sometimes, because I'm like, sometimes it just gets boring.
Yeah.
With just the two heads back and forth on that side sometimes you just want to make a more interesting composition. And with comics, you can get away with that. But
you break the line of action in comics, Dave?
I don't want to. Like, it's my instinct not to. So I say that, but it literally is like crushing to make myself do it sometimes, where I'm like, I have this idea for a shot, but it's breaking the 180 rule. It doesn't make sense. And, and I'm like, wait a minute, you can do that.
Yeah, that is a fun thing.
Within reason, of course. You don't want to get so crazy everyone's confused at your artwork too.
Yeah. But that is the fun thing about comics. And the other, to me, the biggest thing that's the appeal of comics. Like, I've met so many animators and stuff that like doing comics. And I think that the addiction is the fact that it is much more of a one-man show.
Yeah.
And so it's like, there's teams sometimes, assembled even on comics. But if there are teams, they're much smaller teams. And so there's less of a process. There's less of a political process to pull something off in a comic.
Yeah.
Like, you can just kind of opt, like, okay, I'm going to use this costume, or I'm going to have this thing happen, and I'm going to shoot it from this angle. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So there's less review. There's
less bureaucracy and a lot of, less review, less approvals.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of addictive for storytellers because it's like a very immediate, form of storytelling.
Is that comics or is that just indie versus corporate stuff?
Well, yeah.
Well, if you're Jim Luhan, I guess it would be animation too.
Right? Because because if you're looking at you can do the same thing in animation until you get the bureaucrats involved. Because I imagine the Marvel and DC guys, they don't have the same freedom that we've got to just do whatever we want.
No, that's a fair point. Yeah.
That's interesting. I've got so many questions. I just want to check the chats here. If anybody's asking any questions.
There was a question for David. Hold on. I might have to go back a little bit.
Yeah. Have you ever thought of live streaming while you work? Josh's live streams are always fun.
Yeah, I watch Josh's live streams. They are fun because I love just hearing stuff. Just chilling with friends and talking in the background. I've definitely been thinking about it. And definitely set up my OBS to work with it. I kind of want to try that sometime. It's just funny because a lot of the projects I'm working on, I can't share.
Yeah.
Right.
My own stuff. It's when I'm, sitting in bed in my pajamas.
So I know, David, that's
them pajama streams,
I like that idea. So I know that's the case definitely with the animation, and I guess it seems like for you, like the comics you're working on, when you do something that's for Image or something, do they not want you to promote that? Because I'm of the opinion that you share this stuff and then it builds an anticipation for when the book comes out.
Yeah, and I'm still trying to figure that out,
to
be honest. Like, some of the books I'm on right now, they want exclusive announcements at cons, stuff like that. So I can't really talk about them. But, back when I was doing the Image books, we were again dating things. It was like mid 2000s, but people were still using MySpace,
Mm-hmm.
And DeviantArt was big, and that's where I was pushing a lot of my stuff. But now it's Instagram and Twitter's still to an extent, and it's just waiting to see what the next big technology is that people are going to grab onto. But
it sounds like Blue Sky and Substack, I think, are kind of pulling ahead of everything else.
Yeah,
I might have to look into Blue Sky for
I thought about it too, but I'm just so bad with social media.
Me too.
Even Substack, I haven't posted on Substack in a while, and it's not that I don't like that platform.
Yeah,
I'm really enjoying Substack.
Yeah. Well, Notes specifically. That's the social media part, and because I still obviously do my newsletter and everything on Substack, but I even have things ready to go, like images, and I don't know. I'm not good at social media.
That's one of the things I like about live streaming is it's very immediate, and I think David might find this appealing too about it. It's like you're going to be drawing anyway, so it's kind of a way to connect and hang out with people. It's kind of like a bullpen to me, like a digital bullpen. Yeah. That's kind of how I view it.
The thing that keeps getting in my way is whenever I sit down to draw, I want to turn music on and
or and catch up on a different stream that you like watching.
Right. But I thought I found a solution, because you can't just stream music because YouTube will shut you down.
Yeah.
I thought I switched to Tidal from Spotify because Tidal seems to treat their artists a little bit better and not be a giant monopoly. So I'm trying to get away from as many monopolies as possible. And they have a feature where I could put up a QR code or a link, and people could go listen to what I'm listening to.
Oh, that's interesting. That's cool.
And I was like, oh, that's cool, because then I'm not streaming it. But the other person has to have a Tidal subscription. And I was like, it's just nobody knows what that is. And so they're not going to anyway. So I thought I had solved it, but then I don't know. I don't know, man. I'm too slow anyway. And then I think adding the slowness of like, I don't know how Josh does it, where he's just able to keep everybody entertained and keep talking for like 3 hours while he's like doing stuff.
Well, it doesn't hurt that I talk too much. That's an asset that it has been a boon and a benefit to me. It makes sense, Cory, that I became a teacher, because it's like I talk. Yeah.
I remember when I first started teaching, I didn't realize how much teachers talk, because at the end of day one, I was like, I spoke for 6.5 hours today.
Yeah.
Like I just talked for like several 90-minute classes the entire time.
And even in art classes, where it's mostly lab work, right? It's very self-directed. It's students doing a lot of work, and you're kind of giving them pointers. You're still doing a ton of talking,
man, so much talking.
See, I get pissed off if a Zoom meeting goes longer than 20 minutes. We gotta end this.
I can understand that though, because I think we are in a culture, this is just my own opinion, where and maybe I'm just old school in the way of like, I don't understand why there has to be a Zoom meeting for everything,
right.
And every once in a while, and this is no knock on the clients or whatever, because but every once in a while I'll get an illustration job where the client wants to have like 5 Zoom meetings before, and I'm like, we're just doing one image. Can we just let's just write it or have a phone call? Like, we don't have to do and a lot of the time the Zoom meeting you end up recapping anyway in email. So it's like, what was the point? I don't know. I mean, again, that might just be my my personality, but I do feel like Zoom meetings are overdone. If you're out there and you're the person who does a Zoom meeting for everything, start questioning whether it's necessary. That's all I know.
I know the exact reason why most of them happen, and it's because bureaucrats have to justify their jobs. There are people that don't need to exist as a job function that are in between the decision makers and the creators, and they feel like they need to do stuff. And so they think that having meetings is what management is. And so they just create meetings because that's what they think management is.
Yeah.
Instead, I think management is get out of everybody's way and make sure everybody has what they need to do what they need to do.
Yeah.
And if I never think about you because I never have any problems, you're probably a great manager.
I just had this great moment. I'm working on this comic book it's one of these that I'm doing for the cybersecurity. So we got a client that they've got a number of products, and we're creating heroes based on these products that they have. And most of the time when we use these, especially for these business clients, there's a lot of people it has to go through and everything like that. And it's usually a nightmare. Everyone wants to put in their 2 cents and all this stuff. So I upload the script, and they're supposed to go ahead and make their changes or whatever, or suggestions. And the first one I get is it's like, who is this? What is the target market for this? And that's something and when I do these things, I constantly have to say, tell people, no, comics aren't for kids. I go to a lot of conventions. I do a lot of signings. They're not kids that are there; they're adults. All right. So first there, and then I have to explain. Oh, so I was getting ready to explain. Oh, okay. The target market is anyone who's ever seen a Marvel or DC movie and enjoyed it, which have grossed over $30 billion. Or anyone that's considers himself a geek or a nerd that's in the tech space or cybersecurity
silly that you
space.
have to explain that.
Or whatever. Or anyone that wants information delivered in a way other than a boring PowerPoint presentation. But so I was getting ready to do this, and then so we're working with 2 specific people, and the one of them just says, ignore this. And they said, anyone, we're the the point people on this particular project. All we want is you guys let us know if there's any inaccuracies in like the technical stuff. And don't.
That's awesome.
I loved it. That's that
beautiful.
rarely happens.
Yeah.
That's
I love
great.
that.
Yeah.
No, you don't need to justify your existence by coming
Yeah.
up with critique either. Like,
yeah.
we don't need your opinion on things that we don't need your
We
opinion
call
on.
those taster's choice, which is
Oh, I love that.
It doesn't make it better. It just makes it different.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
Right.
I know it when I'll see it. It can be a problem too. It's like, especially on a budget, where you're like, well, I mean, yeah, but the budget like is pretty tight, so you need to see it soon. Like, I don't know. Yeah, those are moments I'm not gonna miss from art direction. Is the dealing with the crazy time constraints and the I know it when I'll see it, folks.
Yeah.
Okay, I have another question. We'll start with David and then kind of go around, because I think all four of us have done both animation and comics. Similarities and differences across where's the Venn diagram in composition? So as you're making those compositional choices, like let's call it shot selection, which I think is accurate for both mediums. What do you notice when you're switching back and forth? What type? I mean, you mentioned the 180 rule already, but what do you notice? More or less freedom in one or the other?
To be honest, I feel like animation has a little more freedom in that when I'm doing animation, again, I'm trying to. It's not just a story; it's pacing of individual drawings, right? Or you're building to a moment, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that could be done with by cutting from a wide shot to a closer shot, and then a closer shot and a closer shot as you're kind of getting more intimate with characters and getting tighter and closer. Where in comics, sometimes I'll get a bunch of description and it's got to fit in one panel, right? And then it's kind of like it's really funny because like me and my writer Shannon Eric Denton, we talk about this stuff too, because it's kind of, as we're learning to work with each other at the beginning, it was kind of like funny. It's like, okay, I'm used to pacing. I like to pace things out and stuff, but sometimes I have to learn. The dialogue also contributes to that, where a lot of times with the storyboards, I'm trying to tell the story without words. Mm-hmm. And you still do the same, but it goes the other way too. Like there's a lot of times where I'm used to things moving real quick. So, I might have a page that's just some talking heads and it's 5 panels long, but my next page will be 15 panels because I want you to fly through those panels and build, and each one's a different angle. And it's like Psycho, right? Like the shower scene. It's like 75 different camera angles or whatever he did. It was like you're building up this intensity, and that I think that really plays into it. But compositionally, for me, it's always kind of the same. Even though this drawing doesn't show it, but I like depth, and I like characters moving from the background to the foreground, and vice versa. And I tend to try to do that in both mediums. And you have your key shots that you like to draw, and you'll find ways to implement those, when it fits best, because that's something you can draw well or you're comfortable doing. So,
David, out of curiosity, what's the thing what do you hate drawing the most? Like because you're able to draw a lot, so like what's your least favorite thing to draw, just out of curiosity?
Well, to be honest, it used to be backgrounds, right? Buildings, cars, non-organics, right?
Yeah.
Because I like kind of wiggly lines. I don't care, the perspective and that I like to push it where it's not necessarily realistic, but I tend to like that stuff now. Like, I always hated it, and it took me doing storyboards to find what's my shorthand with doing that stuff. What's you know, like what's your techniques or whatever that you're going to pull out for doing buildings. And, you know, again, in storyboards, you got to draw backgrounds, you got to draw them quick, and you don't want to spend forever on detail. So you come up with your shorthand techniques of, you know, here's a quick little brush move and it looks like bricks. Here, this one looks like trees, you know, Bob Ross style, you know, and you knock it out quick. But, you know, for me, it's more about the subject matter.
Yeah.
And less about what I need to draw with that subject matter. Like, I can find fun in anything. And, you know, I used to have a fun time, even like I used to take the DC Who's Who, you know, and kind of find like what I thought were like the worst characters, you know, like Chlorophyll Lad or something like that. And then try to make a cool pinup. Like, what could I do to make that character just look so badass? You know,
I love
that's
that.
actually a fun challenge.
A lot of people do that. And it's so cool. Like when you see or Suicide Squad and Polka Dot Man's in it. And you know, it's just like, I love that.
I do too. That stuff's just so much fun. So I think you can make anything fun, even advertising stuff that you might not want to do.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe certain, like just drawing props with no story and no, like if it was just something's like, here, we want you to draw the stapler.
Yeah.
And it's like, what's its motivation? What's it trying to do? Is it murder? Is it? No, it's just a stapler. It's like,
It's just a stapler.
Just make it look shiny. It's a stapler. You're like, okay. I guess I'll get into the shiny.
Yeah, I'm not exactly one for technique in making the prettiest drawings. I just want to create characters, make stories, and, you know, get through it kind of the quickest way I can, because I'm already on the next idea by the time I'm finishing up one.
I love that. That's really interesting, man. That's interesting too, to think about. Because I do think that that's something you can't really explain to people why it is. I've seen this in any context where you can just tell when an artist doesn't care, even if what they did looks good. Right. When they've like checked out and they're not interested in what they're doing, it's like it's weird, but it just kind of it speaks.
Yeah, you just see there's no passion in it.
Yeah, so I love that idea of finding the fun in kind of everything, because you almost kind of have to make decent work, you know, because if the second it stops being fun, it's like it's really obvious on the page, you know.
Yeah, then it's work, and then you lose inspiration and you get burned out. And, you know, it's like you gotta find ways to keep things fun and you know. I say that I don't necessarily practice what I preach. I get all the time with projects, but
and that's the thing. You know, a lot of people may not realize, like with work, like it will. There are days as an artist when that's your job where it will be work and it'll feel like work sometimes. You know, so
absolutely. And especially once you throw in deadlines and stuff like that, then it's like you also have to be able to deal with yourself, which is like, okay, I have to let this go. I know I could make this so much better, but I can't, you know, or I'm gonna drop the ball on all the other stuff. So
I love that.
Yeah, you gotta. Yeah, that's tough.
One of the things that sticks out to me with those is. You just have one aspect ratio in film and TV.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And for the most part, though, I feel like in the last few years they've been playing with this a little bit more. You know, Scott Pilgrim and 300 and a few of those that are very comic based. But for the most part, you see one image at a time. Whereas in comics, you're designing a page that has multiple panels, and in that page, you can have any aspect ratio you want in those panels. But to a certain extent, you have to make decisions on the page to lead the viewer's eye where you want it to go. And you're doing that in film, but you have the extra added degree of like motion. And a single image. There might be a bunch of stuff in the single image, but you don't have like panel borders and gutters and that kind of stuff.
That's a really good point, because even when I'm doing my comics like that, this is when you're doing storyboards, there's a connection to what you're saying in that I can do pans, like sometimes I'll do vertical pans, where the camera's looking up or down or tilting up and down. To me, that's kind of, I do that sometimes as the, the equivalent of a long vertical panel, but I think what, like what you're saying, now that you're saying it out loud, it makes me realize, that's one of the most fun I have with the comics is that, even this goofy little thing I'm doing here, I like doing the angles and stuff to lead your eye in certain directions. And like you said, it's got to be a composition. It's like you want to catch people's eye with the page, but then when they get in and go in there, and then there's a story too. That's where it's an illustration. It's an illustration full of a bunch of little illustrations. And, it's kind of cool. It's like those mosaic things, where it's like photos of all the movie stills. And then you step away. It's like, oh, I made Darth Vader's face. It's like, but, but it has a similar end result, which is, all these cool individual panels, but then it makes one even cooler, bigger panel.
Yeah, and I think that might be the addiction of it, in my opinion, because it's like the fact that there's so much to consider. It's not just the panel by panel, but it's the page itself, and it's the flow of the story. So you have all the story considerations, but then you have all the same considerations of if you're boarding a film or something, right, where you do kind of have to think about the pace and the flow and a little bit about the line of action. Luckily, not as much, because if you get it wrong, you're not screwing over a whole production team. But it's it's I don't know. To me, that's the fun part. There's even graphic design in it too, where it's typefaces and panel borders and word balloons and how you're going to structure your word balloons to where they don't look ugly or slapped on, it's I don't know. It's a whole, I think to me, the thing that is really interesting about comics for me that keeps me in it, and maybe you guys can chime in on this, but it's just I'll never master it. I'm never going to I don't think it's possible, Yeah. And that's really addictive. I guess that would be similar. I guess nobody masters animation, but I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it just always drives you to learn mistakes and correct on the next one, and, but again, I think with comics, what's different than doing fine art painting or, it's just, you got a story you're trying to tell.
Yeah.
Right. Whether, we're making comparisons about 2D images versus kind of 2D images that are moving, but still both are trying to tell a story. And, I think that's the biggest similarity is it's just, how you're going to tell that story is different. It's just a different medium,
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of funny. Do you guys remember the old, there was this comic adaptions, right? Comic adaptions of movies and stuff like that. And there'd be a lot where they just take a still, right, and kind of trace over it. But then there's other ones where you can tell even they struggle, oh, we kind of got to make a new panel here that wasn't seen in the movie because we got all this information we got to tell, and we got this one page to do it. But then they also used to do photo novellas, right? You could also get Star Wars where it was literally frame grabs from the movie and they put little word balloons on it and stuff. And, that's kind of interesting because to me, that's another type of comic book storytelling where every panel is, and you've seen a lot of artists do this in different books where each panel is the same panel over and over, size, aspect ratio. Some people just do 4 or 5 widescreen panels on a comic page and just follow that, and there's a lot more similarities than I think there are differences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. It's funny too, because like man, I am a sucker for the 9-panel grid. I think because I was a Ditko kid, so I always revert to the 9-panel grid. Like it's like, yeah, I love 9-panel grid. It's so fun. Another thing I really like is I always mention Chris Ware, but like I really admire that Chris Ware is such a patient storyteller that he'll have he has this character Jimmy Corrigan who's kind of a loser type character, right? And he's kind of introducing us to this character, and just to show how he is, he has a scene where the character goes to a restaurant, orders food, sits at a restaurant alone, and just wipes his nose and goes sniff. And he does like 20 panels of him just sipping his drink, his soda or whatever, putting it down, and then wiping his nose and going sniff.
And what's his story that he's trying to tell there? Like the how mundane.
Yeah, he's showing what a boring life this character.
Routine.
Yeah,
or,
it's just so I love. I've always liked that directors or people who will do fast paced and stuff like that, but also don't mind slowing down or being slow paced with elements that need that, because if you're telling a story about a boring character, you know what I mean? You'd actually have to kind of explain.
You don't want life to be the most action packed moment of the movie.
Yeah. So I don't know, that to me is fun too with paneling. And I guess you could do that with pacing, probably maybe more freely in film, because you can have scenes drag on if you want them to, and then hit with something really fast paced.
Yeah. I will say, with comics, I get excited when I do a panel and I'm happy with the panel, where in animation, it's oh, cool, I got a cool panel. Oh wait, that's only gonna be on for 2 frames. I gotta draw 10 other ones around it, and it's that one panel looks good, but it's the crappy one I drew that is gonna be on for 8 frames. Great.
Oh man. With one question, David, which after doing animation for a while and then kind of doing comics again, do you have moments where you kind of, when you're doing a comic, wish you could have a soundtrack?
That's funny. It's I kind of do that in my head, and I know you do music, Josh. I do too. I know it sounds silly, but when I'm doing a comic, I kind of do music at the same time, and I kind of make little sound, I make soundtracks.
Nice.
That have to do with what I'm working on. I know that sounds weird, but it's kind of it's just kind of keeping your head all in the same headspace.
But we had a guy on, Sean Tiffany, who does that as well.
Oh, that's cool.
He writes whole songs and stuff for specific things.
Yeah, because I've definitely had times where, because I do music and stuff, it's and I think even for people who don't,
Mm-hmm.
I think, because we engage in our imagination when we're doing storytelling, it's I think sometimes you hear something and it's there definitely are a couple times where I felt that limitation where, before a book's published, I'm man, it would be cool if I could have this song play when they're on this spread,
Yeah.
or and that's one thing I envy animation for, is the element of sound is definitely that's definitely one that I don't think comics, we can do cool sound effects. And I will tell you, Wolverine, no matter how cool they make him on screen, the schnicked being written in big text is always going to be way more cool than it will be on screen,
Well, you ever as a kid, and again, maybe I'm dating myself, but I mean, I used to love the old records they'd have that came with a comic. It's ding, turn the page, and you're it's Bruce Banner.
This is the story of Star Wars. You can read along with me in your book. You'll know it's time to turn the page when you hear R2-D2. beef like this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Scott, you've got to do that on your YouTube channel. You gotta bring-
I thought about it.
Oh yeah.
I just
do a read along record. Oh my
yeah,
gosh!
but then I'd have to figure out where to press the record and all that, So, but yeah,
You could
could you
figure
do-
out how to DIY and
I've done it.
press
I've
your
done-
own
I've-
wax record without a business.
And I'm a little younger than you, but they did have cassette tapes too.
oh, I know, yeah.
So I mean,
But
that
I
would
think-
be.
Yeah,
I
think
know.
the record is like that's the gold standard. But it's kind of on my list of things to do. And there was somebody a while back that they didn't actually physically make the record, but they took they took the Thing, not the Marvel the Thing, but the John Carpenter the Thing, and they made a read along thing with it.
Oh, that's
and
fun.
recorded
Nice.
it and everything, and they had all the
That's
pages
cool.
and stuff. So that was kind of cool. So I would probably do something like that would never be like that would never actually
It's
have been
something they never do.
yeah. But yeah, I'd love to do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's an era. You know what I found out? Like, there's oh my gosh, what was it called? A Drifting Life. I'm trying to I'm gonna look it up so I get the writer's name. A Drifting Life, because I should know this guy. Yoshihiro Tatsumi. He's like a manga artist, but he does like indie comics in Japan. So they're like a lot of them are like historical or slice of life stories. But he had this story, Drifting Life, and it was talking about because he was one of the early mangaka artists in Japan.
Yeah.
And he was talking about like some of the history of how it evolved into a medium. And I didn't realize this before manga, like they had these scrolls that cartoonists would make. And it was like a scroll that would like basically have like a little crank. And they would like turn, like they would roll the scroll. It was like on a crank lever so that as the scroll rolled, it would change to a different picture. And so there's all these artists who would do like stories on these giant scrolls and then like comic type stories. And then they'd go and they'd do readings of the stories and then they'd like turn the crank as it got to different parts. And this was like the coolest, like it was like the biggest form of like animation type work in Japan until Snow White, I guess, got to Japan. And then after Snow White was shown, like nobody wanted to watch those anymore. So all those artists like they scrambled trying to figure out what to do, and like they came up with the manga idea from that. Just as like a because you had all these out of work artists who were making these scrolls and stuff, and suddenly animation just kind of took over. And so a lot of those artists either went into animation or went into making these, collections. A lot of them were collections of the scroll work, and then they just add text to it. I think that was really fascinating because it's a whole other
that's really cool
realm of storytelling where I'm like, that would be fun. Make like a scroll and tour around telling your stories.
I think I would hate that. I just like I like the idea of making the scroll. Yeah, I'd like the idea of making the scroll, but then somebody else can tour around and go talk to people.
We need to recruit somebody like Frank, Frank Salazar to like promote all of us. That's basically what we need. We all need our own Frank Salazar.
Mel in the comments was saying, this doesn't make sense. The guest is talking. Which I thought was funny. And is also really enjoying the page that you're working on.
Yeah,
thank you.
That is beautiful.
And I just call back that he said, no, I'm not going to draw a whole page in this thing.
It's
and
not
then he
really
did,
right? How I do sketches now. Like I've been doing these like sketches. I've been posting these, like these monster heads.
That's rad.
Yeah, awesome.
But I was doing this thing where I'm kind of laying them out like these, like comic pages. So it's just kind of little sketch doodles.
So
But
you're
they're kinda
considering it.
So this is kind of like what
considering
you're saying, Corey. It's like these are little scenes,
Yeah, right.
And I am kind of doing them in the little widescreen format there.
Yeah, that's cool.
Although I like a little happy duck and
That's
a
cool.
crazy plane of vehicles.
Out of curiosity, when you're doing those in that format, does that make you think of like comic ideas as you're doing it? Because I would imagine seeing a page, you'd be like, okay, now I want to see this story, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, and I think that's where a lot of them come from. But then I also get to do stuff like this, which is like not really my wheelhouse, you know, but I like doing these kind of goofy, you know, weird animals with monsters. I don't know.
I feel like there's something there. There's got to be like a story you could do with weird kind of, you know, almost like Uncle Scrooge like
yeah, like
type.
maybe it should be like a collision of worlds, you know, like these horror monsters invade a you know, happy little village of happy animals, but the happy animals have to like, you know, have to tap into their darker.
I love that. I actually really love that.
And you actually find out like they're almost worse than the monsters.
Yeah, the monsters end up being the heroes, and you find out that the happy animals were actually just really scary.
The smiling villain. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Awesome. I actually really like that. I want to see that made. This is the problem with finite time, right? As a creative,
like, there's a million freaking stories you want to tell, and it's like no time for any of it.
Yeah. Oh.
So
and it takes a big commitment. So like you guys, which Cory, you're definitely getting into it, and Josh, you've done it, and so is Scott. It's like, you know, it's a big commitment to commit to one story for like such a long period of time, you know?
Yeah.
Like you have to fall in love with it. But like, I was going to ask, like, you guys, like when I'm drawing a book, you know, kind of how we were saying, like trying to make, you know, goofy things cool and stuff like that. Like, do you guys find yourself like trying to make like, what's that one cool image on the page? Like I try to like make everything kind of tell the story and be fun, but much like Cory was saying, like you got the overall composition and stuff, but do you guys like find yourself like I try to do this, like try to find one thing in the page that I think is just gonna be really cool looking. Like it makes the whole page work on its own. So even if it's just a bunch of talking heads, right, for a whole page, and they're not really doing anything but moving the story along a little bit, but I still try to find a way to make it visually appealing, at least to myself, you know?
Yeah. I never want to do a boring page. So yeah, I think I do that. And if I've told this story before, but if I find myself bored by the page, I might do something to destroy everything on that page. Like I got really bored. I got really bored one time drawing this conversation between these two characters. And so I just had a bunch of harpies show up and like missile attack the building. And I killed everyone in the building because I was just like, if I'm bored by this, everyone's going to die. We'll just move on with the story because it's just
So David, if you ever have Cory like storyboard a film for you, just don't be surprised if he accidentally kills off all the main characters.
Yeah, I know you needed these guys at the end, but this scene was boring, so they're dead now.
I love it. But I mean, but there is something to that. If you find the page,
yeah.
If you, as the artist, find the page boring, what's the viewer gonna think?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think
unless your dialogue is like so enthralling, but I think with comics that's kind of difficult.
It takes a special type of reader of comics to ignore boring art.
Yeah, I think like for me, I might make a little bit more of boring art, but I guess it's like,
Well,
I always make sure I'm
that.
interested in a particular part of the page, and I'm always making sure that I'm making every panel the best thing I can.
Yeah.
So it's like, even in a sequence, like,
it doesn't even have to do with action. Like,
yeah, that's what I mean. Like,
you could draw
I don't
that
know.
stapler we were talking about before and make
Yeah.
it exciting just by the angle that you draw it in, right? Like,
Well,
Yeah, and
like,
I think,
or it's just the
Josh.
technique.
yes.
Josh, like the panel that you just showed on, I don't know where it was. I think I was on Instagram, and it was just people walking into a house.
Yeah.
But like you did this like low Dutch angle.
Yeah, because
and
I
it
wanted
made
to
it,
build
like,
a little tension because there's a page turn, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but like it literally was just people opening a door.
Yeah.
But it was a cool composition.
Yeah, I'm
of
always
that,
looking for that. But I guess what I'm getting at is, like, even to me, I think even if you're doing slow paced stuff, you want to be artistic about what you're doing. Because like with comics, and I think David will be in agreement with this. I want to hear Scott too on angles and how he approaches like keeping pages interesting. But it's like, for me, it's like you never want to forget that you're telling a story, and that every panel is an opportunity to either further or damage the story.
Right.
That's kind of how I view it, where it's like, you know, you want to start with a good story, and then everything you're doing is icing on that story's cake, and everything you do badly is a potential to ruin that story. So like, you want to kind of, well, I mean, you want to think like a director, you know, like where you're trying to like tell a story.
It's the same thing. Like,
yeah,
one thing with filmmaking, you know, that we all talk about and stuff, but even in animation, is like, why are you cutting? Why does the camera need to change here?
Yeah.
So like, if you go into a close up, why?
Yeah.
Why are you trying to be poignant on this one person and what they're about to say, and that's kind of like a crux to the plot? Or if you're just doing it because you feel like you've been on this two shot for too long, to me, that's not always a good enough answer. You know, it's like, that's an unmotivated cut as far as I'm concerned. It's like, you know, it's gotta have a reason to.
Yeah, I think that's where the illustration background for me comes in too, because it's like, dude, if you're illustrating something, you are telling a story, and and that's your primary job. Like, if you want to render a duck beautifully, like, go get into fine art, you know. Right. I always use rendering a duck as an example because like I've definitely, especially when I used to teach college, and I'm sure Cory's stumbled upon this, you'll come across those art teachers that just want to teach people how to render a duck beautifully. And it's like, I could go in like a gallery of rendered ducks.
Stamps? Like what?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm saying, like, I could go into a gallery with like the most beautifully rendered ducks you've ever seen and never remember any artist in that gallery. Whereas if I saw a bunch of people just draw a duck and tell a story about it with like the way they approached it, it'd be a lot more interesting. And I might actually pay attention to who did which piece. Right.
Yeah. Well, and you might not even remember specific details about the piece. Like, you may not remember the angle or anything, but you walk away with a feeling, or, you know, had some sort of impact. But all that being said, when I'm doing comics, I'm still all about just having fun and doing the art and you know, the detail and stuff. I like, that's rewarding for myself too, you know, just to do that kind of stuff.
David, you do work super quick. I am very envious. Like, that's beautiful.
It's just sloppy. You know.
I like it though. Like, I think sloppy for you is pretty pristine for a lot of people. So
thank you.
It's nice work.
Yeah, but it's definitely like, look at that guy. There is no real anatomy there.
That's the great thing about drawing monsters and stuff.
Yeah,
exactly. Right. You can get away with it.
Yeah, monsters. I feel like monsters and vintage robots are like the most fun things in the world to draw.
Yeah, that's why I draw so many zombies and robots.
Scott, what about you? Like when you're approaching a page, do you kind of think about like one key frame you want everybody to look at? Or are you thinking of the whole first? Like how do you kind of approach it?
I guess it depends on the page. There's certain ones definitely that I want to make a certain impact, and I guess sometimes some of that is just I don't know. It's just like a I don't know, intuition, or like sometimes I don't even think about it. But when I go to either thumbnail or whatever, I'm like, okay, like the Dutch angle you guys mentioned or something, or like tilt this or do something like that. And sometimes it's just, well, I got to do this to make it look cool, but I'm not really like thinking about it so much.
Yeah.
But there are definitely, it just depends. There are times, obviously something like this thing here is going to be like a double page spread cover. So there's a lot of, composition and stuff. But then, sometimes like the one that the one that I'm working on now, I'm going to be working with some other artists. I'm scripting it. And like for that, I know the artists I work with, so I'm trying to cater to their strengths, each particular story. Like one of the artists is going to be Kevin Cross, and I know he likes to draw like Frankenstein. So I kind of created like a monster type character for him to do.
Oh, that's going to be rad.
Sort of, I thought, Federica's the other one, and she's really good at crowd scenes. So when I had one part of the story where it's going to take place in a football stadium, I'm like, I'm going to give that to her because she just like nails that stuff.
Remember when you guys said, "What do you not want to draw?"
Yeah.
Stadium scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that kind of stuff. And then there's like the one that Kevin's working on. Also, there's a scene that's kind of like an old West town that I thought he'd probably dig drawing. So, that kind of thing. It's fun and I don't get a chance to work with other artists all that often when I'm scripting and stuff. So I always try to take that into consideration. And then, but for me, because I'm also writing 2 of those stories. There's 4 stories in that book. 2 of them I'm illustrating. For me, like I actually prioritize the other artists first, and then I'm like, oh, that leaves these 2, and I'm like these aren't as interesting because one takes place in a college and the other takes place in a what does the other one take place? I'm trying to think. An airport. So I'm like, so I'm purposely trying to figure out ways to make it interesting for me, like what I'm going to do with the heroes and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, but like for like Young and the Dead or whatever, or this next comic that I'm going to be starting, when you're creating your own stuff, you kind of get to like, okay, I don't really want to draw that. So is it necessary? If it's necessary, yes, I will draw it, but I don't know. And then sometimes the thing is, like with splash pages, sometimes the coolest pages have the least amount of detail. Like because you can take a hero or something and just fill the page with them, just make them huge and it's so impactful. And it's way easier to draw that than draw all this little detail. But still, when people look at it, they're probably going to pay more attention to that one page with this big hero doing something cool.
Yeah.
So
no, that makes sense.
But of course, you definitely need the establishing shots and stuff like that. So you need to do that. But sometimes the coolest pages are the easiest to draw, which is weird.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Like where, I get pretty excited with, because again, like I love drawing and stuff, but when you're working on a 200-page graphic novel, like a quick page is kind of a gift.
Yeah.
And so every once in a while, when you get to that page where it's a close-up of a face or something taking up most of the page, I'm like, yes, this is like a day. Like I'll have this knocked out tonight, Those are fun as well. Like they can be really fun to draw. I have a question that's a little off topic, but David's kind of a horror expert. And I don't know why I thought of it, but I was thinking about, David, a horror plot that I've always kind of wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you know if it's been done.
Oh, let's hear.
I always thought this would be fun because drawing old people is fun. Like drawing people with like wrinkles and just weird old people is fun. I always thought it would be fun to have like a horror story that's like an invasion that takes place at an elderly home.
Hi.
All the elderly home people have to use those as their walkers and stuff as like violent weapons.
There was this
Oh,
one. It
geez.
was called Cocoon.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Is that a
forgot about
horror?
It was for me.
We forgot about mine.
I love.
Are
that
you saying
movie.
hello, Ben?
Yes.
All right, say hello.
My favorite,
Hello.
my favorite part about that movie
Hi.
is most of. Hey Ben,
Wilford Brimley.
my favorite part about that
Guys?
movie is most of the actors that are doing like retirees that are supposed to be like at the end of their life are like 52.
I know, right?
Like if you look at the ages that they were, like as a kid, I was like,
Horrible.
yeah, they're really old, and now I look at them and I'm like, yeah, I'm almost that age, and I
Yeah,
hope
I
I'm
just saw
not.
somebody post a meme where it was they had Ralph Macchio now and Mr.
Yeah.
Miyagi before he died, and like Ralph
Right.
Macchio's like way older, but he
Oh,
doesn't
man.
look as old. Or like when they first when they did The Force Awakens comes out, they show that Luke Skywalker is the same age that Alec Guinness was when he was in
Wow.
Star Wars, and they're like, wow. So it's just like I think people are just healthier or living longer or looking better nowadays than at younger ages. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I've got a question, and we're at 90 minutes, so maybe this is another topic for another time. But I'm curious. You've been very successful at pitching, right? And that's something I have almost no experience in. What are if like your top one or two things in that you should or shouldn't do in pitching a comic idea or pitching an animation?
Well, I mean, it's always you kind of got to cater to who you're pitching to, right? Like, what's the demographic you're going after? What's the but that's kind of tough for me personally. And this changes, like my ideals here. Sometimes they'll work, sometimes they won't, because it's depends on who you're pitching to. But I personally like to, you have your idea, but don't be so married to it that you have it so figured out down to a T that the whole thing falls apart if anybody wants to change anything. So, and again, that depends on the project and how dear it is to you, how long, if it's something you had your whole life and you're like, no, I'm not changing anything, then that's absolutely acceptable. But if you're trying to just get other people interested in what you're doing, they're kind of like you were saying, with execs trying to justify a job, it kind of goes in everything. And that everybody wants to put their fingerprint on what they're working on. And that includes executives or non-creatives or whoever's attached to your project. So, but I think most projects, you're going to have, if it's going to be with a big streamer or something like that, it's going to be a partnership, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of my biggest thing is just don't get so attached to your own thing that you're not willing to compromise on certain things. And compromises aren't necessarily bad. In a lot of cases, I'll fight because I don't like some note or something that I got. But then it also makes me think, okay, well, if they're seeing this, again, how can I make that cool? How can I make that note work where it serves their purpose, but I'm not so pissed off either,
Yeah.
That's an art form in itself. I don't know if any of that answers your question, Cory, but it's kind of that's my biggest takeaway, or at least what I feel like, I have to do myself.
And is that something that comes out in the initial like pitch, or is that something that comes out after discussions start happening.
Yeah, I mean that's usually in discussions, right? So like
Uh-huh.
in the pitch itself, I'll have things figured out, but sometimes I do leave some things purposefully vague,
Sure.
and that it forces somebody to ask questions,
Okay.
and it kind of can force a dialogue to take place, right? Because again, if you have it so figured out, they might just think in their head, I don't like this aspect and this aspect, and this person has it pretty well thought out. They're not going to want to change. We're just going to pass. Where I'd rather have them say, what do you think about this? Or at least ask, why do you have something this way? And you can defend your choices, and they can see, oh yeah, you actually have a valid reason why you want to do something that way.
Yeah.
But honestly, they say there are right and wrong ways to pitch, but honestly, I just feel like it's a matter of who you're getting, how good their day was, what they're looking for at the time, and who know.
Yeah.
It's there's politics and everything, so it's kind of a mixture of all those things.
Yeah, like for like a good example, I have a friend who pitched something that went over really well, but they had just signed like 4 projects that were eerily similar.
Yeah,
and so they just were like, yeah, we don't want to like compete with our own product.
Yeah,
like,
and that happens, and that's where timing. It's just like, and you don't even know what's the right time or the bad time. Really, it truly is. Up to a fate and the luck of the draw, and being at the right place at the right time, and that's the hard part, And I have respect for anything that gets made. That there's a lot of movies people say are just trash, and it's like I may agree on a story aspect, but something still got made, and it still needed a team of people to pull it off.
Yeah.
So I have respect for that. Even if I like the story or the material, but.
Well, and there are so many moving components to film. To have a film that comes out and is coherent is a miracle in itself.
Yeah.
Like,
it really is, and it's just such a challenge. There's so many moving parts, like you said, but not only that, but there's so many opinions, right? And everybody who has a role has an opinion. And it's kind of like what I was saying with the storyboard artist, right? You got to give them room to play too, or they become disgruntled, or it's like, I mean, I guess if you get to a point of a Spielberg or Ridley Scott or something, it doesn't matter. You could just everyone's going to listen to you. But for the rest of us who are directing cartoons or low budget horror movies or whatever, it's you gotta have people that want to work with you, and people that you want to owe favors to someday.
Yeah. Okay, let's wrap with this question. Dylan is asking, could you give a couple of tips on monster designs?
Yeah, I don't even know how to answer that. Like this guy, I was just trying to start with a normal guy head and then just kind of warp the shapes. I like coming up with just bizarre shapes, but I've done character designs for lots of shows and stuff too. And one of the most important things I think is the silhouette. If you made this all let me see if I can
do you follow the artist Beast Rec on Instagram?
Oh yeah.
So he's got this challenge where he just puts out these weird shapes, and then you fill in the shapes with whatever you want. So that's one thing you could start doing, is just make a weird shape and like, oh, how could this be a creature?
Absolutely. So like, even if you look at this guy now, just making it all black, it's like the shapes, what the hand is, what the head is, and it's clean, especially for animation, clean silhouettes. But I like grisly stuff. I like, lots of little detail here, but then there's areas that don't have any detail. Like you have these big patches and then little details that accumulate in the creases and cracks, and whether that's scales or dead skin or, melting flesh, whatever. But then, you have these other areas that are a little more vacant.
Yeah.
And that's
It's
like
almost
using
like-
everything else, breathing room.
It's almost like spotting details as you would spot blacks, because you don't want so
Yeah.
much detail that it just gets confusing. Yeah.
Right. And again, it's what do you want the eye to focus on? And sometimes, it's having a lot of detail, and having the area with no detail is the area your eye will go to.
Yeah.
And that's what you're trying to draw to. But with monsters, I'm just like, I have a lot of the standards. I like zombies and stuff like that are very humanoid. I like humanoid monsters. I'm a big Frankenstein's monster fan, but sometimes you want to just take what's traditionally think about something and change it. Like, oh, we have two eyes. Well, let's make multiple eyes. And maybe they're not on the face. Maybe he needs to see on the side of his face, and think about what's the reasoning for breaking some of those rules, like if it's again, having eyes on the side of his face, it's so he can, see somebody sneaking up on him from the side. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just thinking about one of the most terrifying monsters I've read was in the Sandman. There's that I think he's like the Corinthian, where his he had this guy whose eyes are mouths, and then the mouths eat eyeballs. And it's like just the visual look of somebody having a mouth in their eye socket is just so disturbing. It's something I wouldn't have even considered, but I think like that kind of thinking is pretty good, where it's like, well, what else could be an eye,
Oh, and a lot of the time for me, it's like, I just like creature design. I like making monsters. I'm not necessarily out to scare anybody or gross people out. It's just like, just having fun and just not letting, what set boundaries for yourself. Just have fun with it and just let whatever comes out.
I love that.
It's kind of a very Geiger way of thinking, right? Where the more human things you have, the more terrifying it is, because it's like something that you understand very well, but then different.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's cool.
Makes
Cool.
sense.
Well, let's wrap. Anything else you wanna hit, David, before we kind of sign off?
Not really. Just still got some TV shows out. I pushed it on our Halloween one, Twilight of the Gods, and Arc, the animated series on Paramount. So I was a director on both of those, and I can't wait.
They look amazing.
What's that?
Those two projects look incredible.
Yeah, I'm really proud of both of them. Like,
yeah, they're awesome.
A lot of work went into both those projects, and I don't know, it's really rewarding and fun when you're proud of the project. I'm sure you've all had that, where you have to make excuses for the project. I love having a project where it's like, oh, just go check it out.
Yeah, it's amazing.
There's no caveats. There's no, you're
not like, we did the best we could with these limitations. It's like, no, just check it out.
Yeah, that's the best feeling.
Yeah, that's
amazing.
Cool. But yeah, I can't wait to announce when these books when I'm allowed.
Oh, I'm stoked on those.
Yeah,
I'm biased to comics, like always, so I'm most excited about the comics.
Yeah,
that's great.
They're kind of, and I will say, even though we're wrapping up here, just one of the most rewarding things about comics that I think I like more than animation or any of those things is that with a comic, you can actually have a tangible printed copy in your hand, and nothing beats having that. Even if there was a show on DVD or something, it's not the same. I just love having a comic, and again, even though comics, if they don't pay as well as other things, I'm always going to do it, because not just the storytelling, but again, I just love the format and having a printed thing in our hand,
Yeah. Josh, where can we find your stuff?
So you can find me on YouTube live streaming while I'm working on Not Death But Love, the strange supernatural story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, which is a graphic novel for Turner Publishing. And then you can also pick up Jacob's Apartment or Two Stories, my two existing indie graphic novels that are hard to pitch, so go support them. And then aside from that, just my music and stuff like that. But David, as usual, it's always fun to hang out and have fun.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me again. This is just so much fun.
Yeah, anytime you want to come on, it's
I'd love to. You may want to draw.
That's great. Scott, where can we find your stuff?
You can find my stuff at Serkworks.com. That's my website where you'll find my wax packs that I make based on all your favorite movies, television shows, and bands and things that they never made wax packs of. Also, I have my comic book Young and the Dead, Kids versus Zombies. Just think Goonies meets Night of the Living Dead. Find that on my website. And then I have a YouTube channel where I've got videos where I make cool projects based on stuff you love from the Gen X era, or maybe if you're younger, check out some of the cool stuff that you're not familiar with. I think you'll still dig them. And then you go for a little further back in my website, you'll find my series. On my YouTube, you'll find my series, Making Comics 101, most comprehensive free course on making comics that you're going to find anywhere.
That's awesome. And I got it. Okay. And you can find my stuff at CoryKerr.com. If you go to CoryKerr.com/rage, then you can get the first 5 pages of this comic for free, and subscribe if you want to get the rest of the pages for this comic for free. It is, imagine an animal farm, except insects, rebelling against the Industrial Revolution and big tech. Yeah. And so it kind of all takes place in the shadow of a giant oak tree, where like a local wannabe magnate is doing some kind of seedy business practices. And you kind of see all that kind of play out in the dirt and the mud. And so that's called Rage of Enlightenment, and you can get it for free. I'm serializing that. I will be releasing a new chapter of my book about what happens if time breaks, and you can see that at CoryKerr.com/book for Heart of Eternity. And if you're not sure when we're going live, like today, we went live an hour earlier than we would normally do, and we'll be doing that for the foreseeable future, I think, until the time zone changes again. And sometimes it's on Josh's channel, sometimes it's on Scott's, sometimes it's on mine. Most of the time it's on a Thursday. But if you want to make sure that you are absolutely certain about when that is happening, jump onto the email newsletter for the Artcasters, and Scott will send out an email about 30 minutes before it goes live. And that link is in the description of this video. Okay. Thanks for coming on, David, and we will we'll catch everybody in the chats next week.